Good evening. My name is Jess Moore, current AIGA Colorado president. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. It's our final speaker of 2016. It's been a wonderful year, and we are pleased to see so many of you here this evening. Not only this evening, but at all of our events across the state. You are AIGA, and we do great things together. Sometimes, not so great things. So check out our event next Thursday, Going For It, where 4 local designers will share their stories about success, failure, and everything in between. Design Slam is next Friday, where students compete head-to-head to solve visual problems in front of an audience. We wish you great success, and may the odds be ever in your favor. Our success depends on you, and I'm inviting you to give your feedback. So look for suggestion boxes at events coming up. Don't hesitate to find any board member. We're usually wearing orange lanyards. Or of course, there's always email. Your feedback is also encouraged in a big way. Coming December 1st, AIGA is partnering with Google to launch a design census. Sign up at designcensus.org. Before I leave you, there are AIGA Colorado Cards Against Humanity cards on the table if you did not get them. We have an answer card and a question card. I'd like to thank Creative Circle, Avondale Type Company, ABC Imaging, the Denver Art Museum, and the Design Council, our sponsors for this evening. And now I'd like to introduce Mike Hayway, our speaker series chair.
How about those Cubs? I don't watch football, so it's lost on me. Before we start, at the end of tonight's presentation, we're going to have a raffle. So we'll have one fancy toy from the Creative Circle there to give away, 5 typefaces from the Avondale Type Co., and then 3 Cards Against Humanity sets complete with 6 expansions. So the more of you leave, the better opportunity for those who stick around. So here we go. Amy Nicole Schwartz is the blank at blank. If you play Cards Against Humanity, you probably would have answered with something completely offensive and or hilarious. If you read our brief tonight about the speaker series, you would have correctly answered that she's the design director at Cards Against Humanity and Black Box. So Amy is a designer who specializes in branding, digital experiences, and games. She's a diverse career, ranging from a lecturer at DePaul University, where she has taught courses on semiotics and visual design, the history of graphic design, and trends in contemporary graphic design, to working at the notable ad agency Leo Burnett, and now, of course, her position at Cards Against Humanity and Black Box. She has won several awards through AIGA Chicago, notably the Emerging Designer Award of 2016, and she's the winner of Command X, the live design competition at AIGA National in 2015. So originally, Amy was going to be speaking tonight on deleting your LinkedIn account and making friends with people in real life. And as an obligatory LinkedIn user, and an individual looking for any excuse to actually delete my LinkedIn account, I was looking forward to that, but we're going to do a last-minute switch-up. So tonight, she'll be speaking on something else, which we'll let her introduce, but there is no question that design impacts our lives and shapes how we interact with our environment. So tonight, in her talk, Design is Political, Amy will speak on how designers can leave their mark while considering the consequences of their design. So without further delay, Amy Nicole Schwartz.
Hey everyone, is my microphone on? How about now? How about now? Hey! Hi everyone, I'm Amy Schwartz. Thanks so much for coming out. I'm really excited to be here. This has been a whirlwind 24 hours for me as a Chicagoan. I have cried 12 times in the past 24 hours, and that's not a joke. I can detail every moment that I've cried today. But I'm feeling really good now. I'm really excited to be here with all of you, and I'm looking forward to speaking to all of you later. So like Mike said, I was going to give a little more lighthearted, cheeky talk about how LinkedIn sucks and how everything cool that's ever happened to me in my life and in my career has happened through people and networking and coming to events like this. And I still feel that way. But instead of giving that talk, I'm going to talk about our responsibility to take care of people and what that means in design. So a little bit about me. You're probably familiar with Cards Against Humanity. I'm the design director there, so I work on a small team of people creating everything that we do that has a visual component, as well as our, ooh, got louder, as well as our sister company, Blackbox. And I'm also the co-vice president of member experience at AIGA Chicago. I started that position this summer, and I'm really excited because, like I mentioned, everything great that's happened to me has happened through events like this, and AIGA Chicago has been a huge part of that. So if you're not familiar, Cards Against Humanity is a party game for horrible people. That's what we call the game. It plays like the version of Apples to Apples you wish you didn't play with your mom and stepdad on the night of their first wedding, but I did. So it was created by 8 childhood friends from Highland Park, Illinois, a suburb in Chicago. And they made this game as something to bring to a New Year's Eve party, because it's easier to go to a social event like this when you have an activity, and it makes talking to strangers a little bit more fun and a little less scary. It's something to do while you drink a beer. So they made this game, and all of their friends wanted it, so they thought, sure, we'll lay it out, print it on business cards at Kinko's, and we'll give it to friends. So they did that, and Kinko's employees were very confused. And around this time, Kickstarter came out, and I thought, this is a great way for us to get a little bit of money to print this game to give it to all of our dumb friends who are dumb enough to want to play this thing. So they put up a Kickstarter and asked for $4,000. They got $15,000, which was more than they expected, and they thought, that's great. We can just make a few more, sell them online. So they put them up on Amazon, and they sold out. And then they had all this money left over. And they thought, well, let's print more. And they sold them on Amazon, and they sold out. And we accidentally became a company of about 20 employees. And since then, we've become the highest rated, most wished for, and best-selling toy or game on Amazon, which is not bad for a party game you made because you're a little bit socially anxious. So as we sold more, the company grew, and now we have about 20 employees in our Chicago office. We'll always be in Chicago because, believe it or not, I'm not the only one at the company with an intense amount of Chicago love, which you could maybe tell from my outfit tonight. So as we grew, we discovered the limits of selling on Amazon. It's a little hard to control that experience because when we sell Cards Against Humanity to you through Amazon, you're Amazon's customer. And Amazon, they're great, you know, 2-day delivery. I wish I could figure that out. But I don't have your email information, so I can't invite you to comedy shows that are happening in Chicago or tell you when we're going to cool events like PAX West or PAX South. And if you had a really great experience or a really awful experience, I'm not able to reach out to you and let you know. It's also hard to sell really, really ridiculous products like actual bullshit for a Black Friday promotion when you're working with Amazon. So we decided the best way to do this is to do what we've always done, and it's set our goals really high and figure out how to do it ourselves. And when we realize that we need smarter people in the room to make it happen, we hire those smarter people and have them help us solve these problems. So we started to sell the game online. We made our own web store, and that allows us to control this experience, ship products, provide excellent customer service, and invite our fans to all these events. So creating a web store is pretty easy. There are lots of things now that you could use like Shopify and Squarespace. So we're not really brilliant for figuring out to make our own web store. But the thing that we got really good at is all of the boring business sides that happen outside of that website. So we learned all about warehouses, pick and pack fees, shipping rates, VAT tax, which is a thing, and we thought, hey, this is something that we're good at, and that's really the hardest thing for people who are turning projects into companies. We can offer this as a service to other independent artists and designers and help back the things that we want to see happen. And I don't know, maybe make a business for when people get tired of our poop jokes. So we started Blackbox. So Blackbox is a logistics company that helps these creators with the fulfillment and planning of Kickstarter projects, and then helps them turn that project into sustainable business. So we do things like paying your taxes, giving you an API to sell on your website, so you don't have to make a website by scratch. You could put it on a Squarespace, you could put it on a Tumblr, you can hand code a website, whatever you want, we can help you sell it. And that API connects to warehouses that will sell and store your product all over the world. So it really takes a lot of the headaches out. If anyone here has ever Kickstarted a project, you know that there's a lot of logistics that go into making your product, getting it from the factory to you and then to your fans, and you end up keeping things in your mom's basement and borrowing your uncle's neighbor's van to drive things to the post office, and then you realize, darn it, Brazil has $40 tax to import this, so I just lost $30 on this game. That's not fun, and we got good at it, so that's what Black Box is, and that's what I'm really excited to do in my current job. So now that you have a little bit of a background on what I do, I wanted to talk about what I think the bigger picture of design is. I've had some experience working at big firms and smaller agencies, innovation consultancies, digital product teams, and the thing that I've learned about working at all of these places is that the most important thing to consider when you're designing is the people affected directly by your work. Design is truly all about the people. This is where I'm going to talk about the Cubs. You knew it was coming. So the Cubs won the World Series last night for the first time in 108 years. And that's a big deal. But that wasn't a big deal because of bats and balls and strikeouts and RBIs. It's a big deal because baseball brings people together. And for everyone who is celebrating the World Series win right now, that's about the times we had going to games with our dads on our birthdays, or thinking about our grandfathers who passed away a few years ago and how they waited their whole lives to see this and how they didn't have it, but we had it in our lifetime. It's a really emotional thing because it's about people. This is a photo taken from Wrigley Field where people have been writing messages in chalk to their family members that are no longer around to see it. I'm getting a little teary-eyed. So this is what I'm talking about. Design is about people the same way that baseball is about people. These are all things that we can get caught up in, but it's not about the pixels and it's not about the RBIs, but it's about the emotions and the experiences that we're creating for these people. So design is inherently political because it has consequences. Consequences for those people that are using our products. Consequences for the laws that we make, the companies that we help make money through the products we're creating or the ways that we're advertising their products. And some design is overtly political, like deciding to go work for the Obama campaign. A lot of really great designers did that, and that did help affect the way that people viewed Barack Obama, and potentially that had a major influence in him getting elected. From both a visual standpoint, like the famous Shepard Fairey poster, to a very user experience standpoint, like all of the tweaks that they did on the donation forms and how they were using that iterative design process combined with data to maximize the donations they can get. So yeah, of course that design's political, duh, Amy. But even the most mild subject matter has some implications that are financial or societal. It's because design doesn't really exist in this precious vacuum. Maybe if you just draw a sketch in your notebook and post it on Instagram, that's as close to being in a vacuum as you can get. But we're in a service industry, in a capitalist society, in the most connected world that we've ever seen. So when you're building a product for people, or making an ad campaign, you're making money for those people. And those people are using that money to pay their employees, or start other companies, or lobby against places. They're putting their money and their power and influence into other places. And that really shapes what we do as just normal human citizens. So that there's a bigger picture that you have to think about when you join a team. And that seems really abstract. Well, let's make it a little less abstract. There's a lot of talk of changing the world and disrupting things. Like, do you want to change the world? Let's change the world. Let's make a change. Leave your dent in the world. I feel like that's what every company is trying to sell. So startup culture specifically gets at that, the idea of disruption and changing the world, but you have to consider whose world you're really changing. A really pertinent example is Washio. They were a startup in San Francisco that was a laundry service. So you would use your app on your smartphone, and they would pick up your laundry at your house. They would bring it to another laundromat because they didn't own facilities. They were just an app and pickup service. They would bring your laundry to another facility and bring it back to you. And that service, combined with the rising cost of rent in San Francisco by the tech industry being there, means that a lot of laundromats in the area were sort of forced out. They couldn't compete. Their rent was too high. They weren't having as many people come in, so they went out of business. And then Washio, along their way to change the world and make it a better place, went out of business, and they failed. And we love to praise those people for failure. You tried, you did it, but now a lot of people who live in those neighborhoods in San Francisco have nowhere to wash their underwear. That really sucks. Yeah, you made the world a better place for 6 months for upper middle class white people who moved to San Francisco, but the people who have lived there their whole lives now have nowhere to do their laundry. That's just one of many examples of how when you're making the world a better place and changing it, you're often only doing it for a very small chunk of people. You have to think about the bigger picture and the implications of your work. Design isn't a tool. Design is a tool, and it's not about a thing. I got a little tongue-tied, sorry about that. I get really riled up because I've been to conferences and talks where people along there change the world, say, you know, design's about love. This is all about love. We're changing this because we love it. And I don't think that design's about any theme, and it's a little naive to think that it is. Design is a means to an end, and it's about love or hope or change the same way that it's about money and power. So maybe when we're in the Star Trek universe where we've solved basic human needs like hunger and poverty and education, and we can focus on bigger problems, maybe then design's about love because we're starting at a baseline. But sadly, we're not there yet. Saying design is about love or design is about change or about anything is like saying plumbing is about bringing safe drinking water to developing nations, when sometimes plumbing's about moving shit from point A to point B. Design is sometimes about bringing people's laundry from point A to point B and shutting down local businesses in the process. So ideally, yes, design is about love, but your intentions have to come from a place, and you have to be aware that design is a tool and that we're using it in this bigger picture. So what am I blabbering about? Cool, you're talking about some things. We have agency, we have free will. That's really, really cool. We could do whatever we want, and I want you to embrace that. You could choose who to work for. You could choose who you're changing the world for. When you're building a digital product, you could really advocate for the users and the people who could be impacted not only by using your service, but by the bigger societal repercussions that your service causes. You can vocally refuse to participate in industries, events, and initiatives that you downright disagree with. Besides ultra-rich and policymakers, no one in the world is in a better position than you are to actively, openly do something about things that make you mad. You have tools and resources and privileges to communicate to people. We do this every day. Design's communication, design is a tool. Reach people, do something about it, embrace it. A perfect example of this is John Hartfield. He was a Dada artist, and he pioneered the use of photo montage as a political weapon. So he was born in Germany, and when the Nazis took power, he changed his name from Helmut Hartzfeld to John Hartfield to further distance himself from this system that he was morally and ethically opposed to. So during his time as an artist, he did a lot of covers for AIGA magazine and posters that were anti-Nazi propaganda, and was really trying to reach this audience and get them to think differently about Hitler, who was in power. So this is what I personally think is the greatest work of graphic design ever made. It's a photo montage of Adolf Hitler with a swastika where his heart should be. His spine is made of gold, and in text below, it says, "Adolf the Superman swallows gold and spits junk." I know, not too wild after reading Cards Against Humanity, but that's a pretty powerful message to be saying during that time. It's really easy in 2016 to look back and be like, duh, we all knew Hitler was a bad guy. If I was back there, I'd be standing up to him. It's really easy to think that we'd never let someone rise to power that we disagree with, or that we would let someone mistreat people. We're too smart. We're too good, you know? We would never let that happen. So okay, Amy, where do we really start on embracing our agency and using design as a tool? It's not hard. Start by asking some critical questions of yourself. Start by considering the consequences of your work at a really small level. Think about your job and who your users are, or who your audience is. Think about what your company stands for and what their connections are. And when you start to see some shit that really makes your blood boil or makes your heart really sting with pain, that's when you snap into action. That's when you do something. So in May, the Cards Against Humanity team was on a design treat in Los Angeles. So there was a lot going on at the time. People were sort of expecting us to make a Donald Trump pack because the agency Sid Lee had made their own fan expansion, and they were quotes that Donald Trump had said that were just a little too crazy to be true. We didn't want to make those jokes about his hair or quote him because it hasn't worked so far, and it's because he's larger than life and beyond parody. I could tell you something totally made up and absurd right now, and half the people in this room wouldn't expect that it was a lie because we're sort of expecting crazier things to come out of this political cycle. It's really unbelievable. So we didn't want to make the easy jokes. We just didn't think like it was making a difference or interesting or funny. So we're sitting around a table working on a different project, and the TV's on in the background, and Ted Cruz dropped out of the race. And as most people do in times of fear, we turned to comedy. So we just sat there like, got a gas mask I could borrow? Oh yeah, I'll trade you a few cans of beans for it. I'm gonna learn some Spanish phrases so I can move to Mexico. So these all just started as jokes, not about what are we as a corporation going to do to profit off this situation, but fuck, what are we as some people going to do to get through this situation? And as we joked around and got a little deeper into it with each other, we thought, maybe we could do something with this. Maybe this is the product we should make. So we created the Cards Against Humanity Donald Trump bug-out bag, which is a pre-packed duffel bag with over a dozen hand-packed items to help you survive the collapse of civilization after Donald Trump is elected president of the United States. So you'll see here it includes some useful Spanish phrases like, help, I am an American refugee, and uncle, what did bananas taste like? A copy of Plato's Republic, some seeds to repopulate all of our food once it's gone, a compass, a flint and steel to help you start a fire to warm your cold, terrified family, hand crank radio to find other survivors, a can of beans to eat around the fire on a special occasion, and a gold locket, a gold locket of former President Barack Obama. I could take down my portfolio website and just put this up. This is all I need. And we also included some comedy rations, but they're not jokes about Donald Trump. They show his rise to power as we have seen it happen. Mild amusement, casual dismissiveness, rage, President Donald Trump, making Islam illegal, nuclear winter, trying to remember what music was. So it's dystopian in nature, but that's what we think a Donald Trump presidency would be. And that's because this is not a normal election. We wouldn't be running anti-Jeb campaigns, that lovable guy. We might disagree on a few things, but I don't think that he's a threat to America. As a Jewish American woman with LGBTQ family members, immigrant family members, Muslim friends and family, no candidate for office has ever made me terrified for the actual safety and well-being of the people in my life, quite like Donald Trump. And I can't sit by on my hands fucking terrified. I fucking will not do it. Am I allowed to swear here? I'm sorry. But we just can't sit by. So if you disagree with me politically, that's okay. But I'm able to go up and do these things because I have free will and you're able to do that too. So do it. Let's disagree. Let's put our thoughts out there. Let's make things happen. So we could have pat ourselves on the back like, good job. You made a joke about Trump. We did our job. Let's just go back to writing poop jokes. But that's naive and lazy, and that's not how we feel. So we knew that we wanted to do an election campaign before we knew who the candidates would even be. And the premise would be that whichever PAC raised more money, we would donate all of the money from the promotion to that campaign directly. So this is what we did with the America Votes with Cards Against Humanity campaign.
This November, we head to the polls and select the 45th President of the United States of America. But today, Cards Against Humanity is asking you to vote with your dollar for the candidate that you support. The Democratic nominee, Hillary Clinton, is a graduate of Yale Law School who has served our country as Secretary of State, Senator from New York, and First Lady of the United States. In her decades of public service, she has tirelessly advocated for women's rights, campaign finance reform, and access to health care. The Republican candidate, Donald Trump, will make America great again. He is a powerful CEO who wears 3 suits at once. All across America, buildings scream his name. Trump! Trump! He always knows what time it is. Donald Trump is a huge man who lives in a golf course. At the end of this promotion, Cards Against Humanity will tally up the sales of both packs, and depending on which pack gets more support, we will donate all the money in support of Hillary Clinton. Exercise your sacred franchise at www.americavotes.com.
So that was fun. So that promotion ended up raising about $400,000, and we used that to start the Nuisance Committee, which is an independent political action committee dedicated to opposing Donald Trump's presidential campaign and repudiating his backwards, un-American policies of white nationalism and fascism. So we could have just donated all of the money to the Hillary campaign and be done with it, because that's easy, but we're in a really interesting spot as Cards Against Humanity. We're troublemakers, we're a little goofy, and we can say things that other political parties can't necessarily say. I also really love where our name comes from. So we're called the Nuisance Committee because it's a family name for our co-founder, Max Temkin. His grandfather was a B-24 bomber pilot in World War II, and his plane was shot down and he was taken as a Jewish prisoner of war. So when he was in the POW camp with other Jewish POWs, they weren't sitting around feeling sorry for themselves. They were really frustrated that they couldn't do everything they could to fight against the Nazis. So they found out that they could sort of do their part their own way by causing little problems within their POW camp, like feeding red peppers to the guard dogs. So instead of thinking about planning an attack, their captors would have to clean up dog diarrhea. So they had little protests and pranks, pretty much anything that they could do that wouldn't get them shot, that could help distract. They called themselves the Nuisance Committee, so that's where our name comes from. So we're able to do things that people can't, like this billboard. If Trump is so rich, how come he didn't buy this billboard? Trump doesn't pay taxes.com. So we put this up outside O'Hare Airport in Chicago right before Trump and Hillary both flew into Chicago. And this was before we found out that Donald Trump likely hasn't paid his taxes in 18 years through a loophole. And he's since bragged about how not paying taxes makes him a strong businessman instead of an un-American turd. So when you go to the website, it details more of his tax evasion and shady business practices. So this is one pretty straightforward example of how we're trying to bring issues to light that we don't think are getting enough attention. This one has been brought to attention, not necessarily through us, but we're glad to have contributed to the conversation. We put this one up in Dearborn, Michigan, which is home of the largest Arab American population in the United States. If you don't read Arabic, it says, Donald Trump can't read this, but is afraid of it anyway. And it goes to trumpistscared.org, which is another website that details more of his backwards conflicting views on immigration. So this was interesting to put in Dearborn, not only because it has a large Arab American population, but because that population there tends to vote Republican for financial reasons. So we're trying to deepen that conversation within people in that community. We don't want to necessarily say this is what you should believe, but we're giving people an impetus to start those conversations and have facts and resources there. This campaign went up in Orlando, Florida. Anyone here play Overwatch? Cool, 2 people. This is Donald Trump mains Hanzo and complains about team comp and chat. For those of you who aren't gamers, this is us making fun of Donald Trump's excuses for why he's not doing well, the same way your friend's little brother complains about why he's not doing good in a video game. It's not my fault. My team sucks. So the website has all of these generalities and amazing artwork by Daniel Warren Johnson, who's a comics illustrator. The main designer for the Nuisance Committee, by the way, is Lindsay Camelio. She is a freelance designer for hire. She's incredibly talented. So they made this campaign together. The controller's broken. These are really playful and great, and this is us trying to engage the 18 to 34 male community in swing states, people who usually aren't as politically engaged, and trying to put these in terms that are interesting and funny to them to get them to start thinking about why the election matters. Our newest series has just quotes, really undesigned, from Donald Trump, things that he literally said. There's really nothing else we have to say about it. It doesn't link to a website. We're just putting his words out there at a large scale for people to be confronted with. So this one is Outside Phoenix, and it says, "John McCain is not a war hero. I like people who weren't captured," which is a horrifying thing to say about someone who's served our country. Didn't vote for him. Very proud to have him in our country. So F you, Donald Trump. We also did some radio and podcast ads with George Takei. I'm going to play one for you now.
During World War II, President Roosevelt signed an executive order to imprison Japanese Americans in concentration camps. American citizens who had done nothing wrong lost their jobs, their businesses, and their freedom. Families were torn apart, and children grew up behind barbed wire fences. Today, Japanese American imprisonment during World War II is considered a stain on the legacy of American history. In 1988, President Reagan paid reparations to innocent Japanese Americans who were wrongly imprisoned and issued a formal apology. When we look back at that history today, it is tempting to wonder, how could this have happened? How could we have been so scared of our neighbors that we locked them up? How did the land of the free get it so wrong? Donald Trump says that when he's president, an armed deportation force will occupy American cities. Trump's deportation task force will investigate innocent people and round them up into concentration camps. Trump says he'll ban all Muslims from entering our country. Donald Trump's plan has once again caused neighbors to fear one another and turned Americans against our own people. This election is a test. Can we learn from the mistakes of our past and reject Trump's cruel, unconstitutional prison camps? Or are we doomed to repeat history? This November, the choice should be easy for all patriotic Americans. We must vote against American concentration camps, and we must vote against Donald Trump.
And this was a billboard that was rejected. Apparently you can't put a tweet that says, "fuck face fun clown stick" on a billboard. This is just a screenshot of a Donald Trump tweet. Rejected. So what's the point of all of this? If you think shit might be on the menu, don't wait for the waiter to bring it out to you on a silver platter. Don't wait for your product to force families out of their lifelong homes, and don't wait for your agency to assign you to a cigarette project if that's something you're morally opposed to. Think ahead. Think of the consequences of your actions. Embrace your free will and your agency. When you see shit coming from a mile away, start running towards and building something better. Be proactive about it. So here's an example of a way we did that doesn't involve something divisive like American politics, but something equally divisive: women in STEM fields. We started the Science Ambassador Scholarship in 2015. It is a full ride scholarship for women studying science, technology, engineering, and math. Not only is it a full ride scholarship, but it also provides them with a platform to talk about their experiences and the lessons they're learning as a way to inspire other young women to go into those fields. It makes it more welcoming when you see faces like you in those areas. So to apply, we had applicants record a 3-minute video lecture of them recording a lecture on a topic in science that they're really excited about. And last year, we awarded it to Sona Dadhania. This is her, smiling away. She's a sophomore at the University of Pennsylvania studying material science and engineering. And her lecture on nanotechnology was inspiring because it presented complex ideas in a clear, easy to understand way that was also really fun and engaging. And she said that she applied for the scholarship. Here's a quote from her. "I would have really appreciated someone who is actually there and who actually knows what it's like to do that, to actually talk to me about it. I thought it would be cool if I can act like that for someone else, to give them something I didn't have a chance to get." So her motivations for doing this wasn't just a free ride, which, I mean, we don't have to make excuses. Everyone wants one of those. But she genuinely wanted to be an ambassador for other women in science. So this is all funded directly through the Science Pack, which you could buy on cardsagainsthumanity.com. Please buy it. It's $10 if you like our game. It is jokes about science written by funny people who understand science more than I do. You could tell by the way I just keep saying science is the term for that. And it helps fund scholarships. So why does Cards Against Humanity care so much about women in STEM fields? First of all, we've all been fortunate enough at our company to attend college. Some of us, like myself, will be paying off student loans for the next 30 years. Some of us got some great scholarships, and that's cool. So we've been lucky enough to do this, and some of our founders who made this game, they never wanted to make a game full time. They went to college, and some of them for STEM, and are currently working in those fields. And they've experienced firsthand what happens when there aren't diverse voices in a room. The more people we have solving our greatest problems, the better the solutions to those problems will be. An example of that is the CarMat Artificial Heart, which you see here. It's a revolutionary device that can save lives. It is a fully artificial heart. It fits 86% of men and only 20% of women. And that's because the thoracic cavity of women is smaller. You can tell that I am probably smaller than most of the men in this room. So if I have heart failure, this probably won't fit me. And there's currently no plans for them to make a smaller model because it's not profitable. But heart failure is still the leading cause of death in women in the United States. Most tech products are meant to fit men. If you've ever held a Galaxy smartphone in your hand, you've realized that. So that's not killing anyone, but this is. Crash test dummies are sized to the average male body, which means that women usually are damaged more in car accidents because they aren't tested to our standards and our body types. When Google Photos rolled out in 2015, it was apparent that they didn't test their software for non-white faces. You could tell by this horrifying tweet. I'm not even going to say what there is, but you could see that it incorrectly tagged people of color as not human. This is what happens when your team makeup doesn't reflect the makeup of society. You're testing and building things for a small group of people. And when you're doing that, you're letting problems like this go out to market. And not only is that just factually inaccurate, but think about what that feels like to be the people in that photo. That's unacceptable, and it's horrifying, and it's so easy to chalk it up to, well, it's machine learning, it'll get better, like tech isn't perfect, but we're the ones building this tech and building these machines, and we're the ones testing it. And if you let this go through to market, you're saying that that's okay. Diverse teams, y'all. Sarah Watcher-Botcher is an amazing designer and writer, and she writes about these issues in her book, Design for Real Life. It's a book-apart book, so it's a short, great read that you can get for $10.99. You can download it tonight on your Kindle or iPad. Highly recommend it. So this is a quote from her. Edge case is a really easy way to write something off, to say, this is not important enough for us to care about. So we often talk about things like using Internet Explorer or an old device, or having color blindness, or any other sort of accessibility issue as an edge case. Those are the people on the fringes. But you're really alienating those people by saying they're on the fringes. And Sarah says that you should call them stress cases. Don't treat the people as fringe, but think about how you're stressing the design. Because if the product you're designing is pleasant for someone at their absolute worst, then it'll be pleasant for someone else. An example of this is the Facebook Year in Review. Earlier this month, it had like, this was your day a few years ago, like memories from this day. And it was all memories about how my pet died the year before with little hearts and balloons around it. Like, thanks, Facebook, for reminding me. People have had the year in review remind them that their child died this year. So obviously, for most cases, it's celebrating a great year. You went to the Grand Canyon, you got a new job, you got engaged, you ate that great ice cream cone with your friend. But for other people, there are real things that are happening. And if you're not thinking about those stressful cases in their lives, you're not designing good products for good people. So another major way that I try to embrace my agency, not only through the work that I'm doing every day, is through community building. I truly think that anyone can grow a community. Not to say that it's easy, but the free will thing. Anyone can go out there and make their community better, whether that's your larger community and ways to be involved in design or outside of design. So in 2015, I moved back home to Chicago after spending 2 years in Michigan for graduate school. And I wanted to bring the discussions that I was having in graduate school back home with me because it was really exciting and I was learning a lot. People with different backgrounds in design or art fields were talking to each other and I was really growing. And I thought it's pretty dumb that I had to pay $60,000 to do that. I thought anyone could do this. You just need people in a room, but someone has to put them together. So I started Liminal Space through a grant from AIGA Chicago. They had a What's Next grant for student projects. I applied and they gave it to me, which is really great. So the goal of Liminal Space was to foster dialogue in the Chicago art, design, and technology communities and break down barriers to access. All of the events that we had were free or under $20 to attend. They were open to anyone, and they were focused on discussion, experimentation, and community. So we had some risograph printing workshops. I used some of the funding to buy a risograph printer, which was kind of new and exciting at the time. And we had workshops where we only charged for the cost of paper. It was 3 or 4 hours on a Saturday, and I taught people how to use this technology. And anytime they wanted to use it after, they just had to get in touch with me and bring their own paper. We had some panel discussions with different people from gallery backgrounds, design backgrounds, writing backgrounds to discuss where those fields overlap. And those were free events. And we had a gallery exhibition at Rational Park in Chicago. This is a photo from that. The show was called Up and Atom, and it featured all designers and artists who had never shown work in Chicago before. For many people, it was their first show. There was no fee to apply. There was no fee associated to attend. It was just all grant money. And these were things that I wanted to see happen in Chicago, and all I had to do was spend a lot of time on it, but also find ways to make it happen by getting other people involved, their feedback to make it better, and get some buy-in on it. We also hosted a design residency program. We had Cameron Ralston, who is a designer from New Zealand. He worked out of the Cards Against Humanity office during that time and made some projects related to self-publishing, identity, and politics. So since he was from New Zealand, this was during the time that the flag redesign contest was going on. And he did a project where he was taking a photo of the sky in Chicago above the office every day at the same time that his friend in his hometown in New Zealand was taking a photo of the sky. And they composited the photos each into a flag. So one is the Chicago sky and one is the New Zealand sky. I think the Chicago one is the uglier one in the back. So it's an interesting project to the idea of designing a flag and what it is to be defined by your location and by your identity and what role design has in that. So that was a really cool thing that I got to help in a minor way just by putting pieces together. So I did that for about a year, and I realized that what I thought was a really cool thing for my community was still great, but it was hard to do, and it was hard to make it really exciting because it was just me running events or coming up with ideas for things, and I couldn't get people involved. And when I was thinking about what my ideal goal for those events is, I realized that it's everything that AIGA is doing. So this year, I joined AIGA Chicago as the Vice President of Member Experience, partially because AIGA has given so much to me, but also because I felt like things could be better, not to be a downer. Like, the events are cool, but we could always be improving, and I really wanted to help grow the events and bring in some of the things that I was experiencing with Liminal Space, like making events accessible to people, branching outside of traditional graphic design and bringing in user experience designers and writers and architects and other folks, and talking to people who aren't currently members of AIGA and finding out why. What makes them feel not excited or not welcome there? And how do we change that? And how do we make it for everyone? Because AIGA is for us. You know that. You're here tonight. So one event that we did that came out of the involvement there was the Get Out the Vote poster design event. We did a risograph printing workshop because I know how to do that, and it was easy. But it was really fun. So we had an open day where people can come on a Saturday afternoon. We gave them small amounts of supplies, and they designed everything off of the computer by hand. So they had some cut and paste assets that were printed out and drew things. We printed posters all day and then dispersed around the rest of Chicago to hang these up. Lost my train of thought. So I think Austin Kleon really said it best when he said, "The world doesn't need more vandals, it needs more cleanup crews." If you're trying to leave your mark on the world, which we all should be thinking about, don't let your mark be the philosophical equivalent of drawing a dick on a cave wall. We need fewer people drawing on dinner plates and more people thinking about how to put food on those plates for other people. Think about the consequences of your work and the mark you want to make. Start thinking about that now and start doing it now. Thank you, and go vote. That's it. I think we're going to do Q&A. Sorry for swearing. Over here.
So my question was, when you were in Chicago, how did you cultivate the new artists that have never shown before? How did you find them?
Oh, great question. I didn't think too much about it. I had a website, and I had, I think, a Google form and a Facebook page. So I promoted it on Twitter, and then on Facebook, AIGA Chicago helped promote it too, since they had funded all of the initiatives and they made it all possible. I reached out to other people I knew in the Chicago design community who worked at agencies and got them to retweet it or post it from their accounts that had bigger followings. And then I talked to some friends I knew who were in some of the fringe spaces that I was interested in, like the technology areas or writing, poetry writing, and just asked them to share it with their own communities. So it was really organic and didn't really have a business approach, just starting with people with the most following and cool people who would help out.
What do you like most about working at Cards Against Humanity, other than all the amazing things you already said?
Man, I really, really love my job, and I don't think I will leave for a long time. I would say the best thing is people. We have a really amazing team of people that work there. If you think about the voice of Cards Against Humanity, the game, it's kind of like when Stephen Colbert is in character as Stephen Colbert, and then when you see him on the street, he's just Stephen Colbert the guy. So our game is in the voice that's a little cynical, a little dirty, not someone you'd want to babysit your kids. But then we're out of character the rest of the time, and it's lots of really smart, kind people who use their spare time to start scholarships for women or volunteer at animal shelters. There are a lot of women that run our organization and are in leadership roles, so it's really exciting for me to have just mentors who understand what it's like to be a woman leading a team, and I lean on them and I learn a lot from them. And the men on our team are also great. Knock on wood, haven't had any experiences like some other people have had in leadership roles in companies, so I feel really valued and respected there. And the projects are really fun, so I'm working with smart, kind, cool people on really goofy things, and it can't really get better than that. Yeah. Or there was someone over there, sorry.
All right, so I'll try and say this as concise as I can, but one of the things I've noticed with the political advertising is the lack of signs in people's yards. And one of the things that you're kind of talking about is taking these billboards, but I always think about the guerrilla tactics and getting to know our audience, and it's talking from me to you and all of us in our neighborhoods. And what's your take on that kind of, no one is wanting to put a sign up in their yard to really even talk about their opinion in the election. They don't want their neighbors to know who they're voting for, almost. So kind of what's your take on that limited advertising?
That's a really interesting question. And I think part of it is just the nature of this political cycle. It hasn't been like any other election we've seen in American history. I also think that yard signs have been replaced by Facebook. I know all of my relatives who own yards also have a Facebook, and they are talking about the election all the time on there. So I think that the way that we communicate with our neighbors and with our community has gone a little more digital. There are other ways to share that, which makes it easier and faster and also more dangerous and fast and scattered, but that's the world we live in. So I don't think people are as afraid to share their mind, which is good. I think they've moved it to other places. But that's a really interesting thing to think about, how super PACs and other people who are doing big scale advertising can sort of tap into that market. We did not have the time to do that with the constraints of this, but that's a good thing to think about in the future. Hopefully I won't ever have to work for a super PAC again. Not that it hasn't been fun, but I would love for the next presidential cycle to not be terrifying. Let's just bring Jeb back. Please clap.
I don't like microphones. Okay. Well, this is scary. Okay. My question is, as far as inspiration for your game, for the game, how do you find inspiration, and do you play the game to?
I do not.
To ask the questions and to come up with responses.
So we actually have a writer's room that writes all of the cards. For a long time, it was the 8 founders who started the game, but now that they're doing things like teaching astrophysics at UC Berkeley or helping us with our shipping company, they don't have the time, and they feel like they've had their time, and it's not a diverse group of people. It's 8 childhood friends from the same suburb. So now we have a writer's room that's full of local Chicago comedians, a really talented, funny group of people, and they're coming up with the ideas themselves, and they do a lot of testing. So when we write these jokes, it doesn't just end there. There's a system that goes into place, like a grammatical structure we use in the game, and ways to take a phrase that doesn't quite fit but is funny to fit into the puzzle of all of the cards in a way that's hilarious. And we do lots of user testing with people who are familiar with the game to see what jokes are funny, because what's really funny to me might not play well. Like sometimes it's a reference that no one gets or isn't funny anymore. Like we took the Britney Spears card out of the game because that was really funny in 2010, but not really relevant anymore. So I don't know where their ideas come from, but I know that it's now coming from a funnier, bigger group of people, and still going through the really rigorous testing with different people to see what really sticks and what lands. Up in the front.
So Amy, you talk about the start of Cards Against Humanity like it just sort of happened by accident. You guys were having fun and you threw it together. And obviously you grew it from there into something fantastic, and you've used it in so many wonderful ways. You mentioned during your talk about how when you needed someone smarter than who was in the room, you'd call them in. So how did you go about building that team, above your 8 people you started with, and who did you bring in, and how did that help you?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I wasn't part of the original 8, but when they made the game, they started working with friends that were contractors to help them build out these projects. But then as they grew, they realized, we're answering a lot of emails, we need to hire someone to write these. So the first hire was Bain, who's our community director. She really helped sculpt the voice of the rest of the company, the marketing materials, the customer service emails. And she was actually found through Tumblr. She had a job at the time that was in writing, and she hated it. So she poured all of her creative passions into this blog that she ran for fun. And some of the founders were all in this comedy scene in Chicago, found her and thought she was hilarious and thought, that's who we need to hire. She's doing this in her free time, she's great, she has the right tone of voice, let's hire her. Then they hired Trin Garitano, who runs events, because we don't know how to work a convention room or plan all of that stuff, and Trin has been doing events for big companies like McMaster Carr and had worked at conventions like PAX before. So we hired her through the games community because she was part of that scene. So it's a lot of reaching out to people that you know and are in similar circles, which ties into what my talk would have been about today, how the most important thing you can do is go out, meet people, talk to them, ask questions, and don't just talk about yourself, even though it can be really easy, especially if you're with someone who's asking questions and doing the thing. You gotta do the dance and learn about people, because networking isn't about like adding someone to your network on LinkedIn or shaking your hand and giving a business card and then never thinking about them ever again. It's about talking about what's exciting to you about design. If you watch the newest documentary now, what your favorite ice cream place is, like building those relationships with people, because then when you're looking to hire someone, you think of them and vice versa. Or you might set them up with someone on a date or something else comes out of it. I got my job at Cards Against Humanity through a really long circle that I can trace back to being an undergraduate student. It was my junior year at DePaul University, and there was a design conference happening in Indiana where I grew up. And I thought, there is no way anything cool is happening in Indiana, I'm gonna go there. So I went because a classmate had told me about it. And at the conference, I saw two people speak who I thought were really inspiring and great. And one of them came up to me because she could see that I was a little nervous, not really great at mingling. And she introduced herself as Jana Kinsman, and she is an illustrator and a beekeeper, a member of a design collective in Chicago called Quite Strong, which has since disbanded because people have moved on in their careers, but they're still friends. So I met her and thought, okay, I made a friend tonight. And then I met this guy named Amy Schwartz who gave a really great presentation, kind of scared the shit out of me, and was like, I need to talk to this guy. This guy's gonna help me figure out what I'm doing wrong and get a job. So I stayed in touch with them throughout the last year of college, asked some advice on my portfolio, and should I take this internship that's unpaid that will cost me $20 a day to get there? Is that a bad idea? Got lots of advice from them. So when I needed to meet other people to run things through, Jana introduced me to people that became my friends. And when I was looking for an internship, I found out the Chicago Design Museum was starting and they needed some people to volunteer. Not quite an internship, but you had a lot of responsibility and could learn some web projects in a way where if I didn't do it right, I wouldn't be fired because it was volunteer work. And then I found out that Jason was hiring an intern, so I started working at Bright Bright Great. And then through Jana and Jason, I met this guy named Max who had just started this card game on Kickstarter called Cards Against Humanity. And through this like circle of meeting people, I got my first job, which got me to my second job, which then got me a whole bunch of other jobs and into graduate school, and now at Cards Against Humanity. I'm still friends with Jana and have met many other good friends through her, and I'm now married to that Jason guy. All because I went to a small conference in Northwest Indiana that none of my friends wanted to drive with me to. You gotta put yourself out there and go to those things, and that's how everything good in your life will happen. So that's the summarized version of the talk I didn't give tonight. That was a really long answer. So you did it, step one, you came out. Pat yourself on the back, friends. Meet someone tonight. Don't talk about design, talk about anything else that excites you. I mean, design's all right, but there's other stuff. Oh yeah, so the zine that you picked up, the Cards Against Humanity leaked email zine, those are customer service emails we received after the election pack, the one where we donated all of the money to Hillary Clinton. It's just a small sampling of them. We took out the really awful ones, so please enjoy our leaked emails. They're all actual emails we received and what we sent back in return. Names have been changed to protect the jerks.
Am I on? Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you all.